Alright, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to be looking at the 4 commander decks from Commander Legends Baldur's Gate. We're not going to go over every card in this video, but I'll give you a brief overview of all the deck strategies so you can decide which deck is best for you, and you can find a link to the complete deck list in the description below. So let's start with Draconic Dissent. It's an Izzet deck with Furkrag, Cunning Instigator as the commander. This is a 5-mana 3/3 flyer with haste that says whenever one or more dragons you control attack an opponent, you get to goad a creature that player controls. Goad, of course, meaning the goaded creature must attack if able, and it can't attack you, so forcing your opponents to attack each other. Then, whenever a creature deals damage to one of your opponents, if it had to attack, which is to say, if it was goaded, your commander gets a +1/+1 counter and you draw a card. So the idea of this deck is you're flying over the battlefield with dragons, smashing people in the face, but instead of being able to retaliate, your opponents are then going to be forced to attack each other. In doing so will give you counters and draw you cards. You also get Baloth, Baratil, and Clancrafter as an alternate commander choice. So Baloth has choose a background, meaning you can play the enchantment as a sort of commander in order to play Izzet, and all the decks have a alternate commander like this. So Baloth goads every creature in play that has less power. It only has 2 power to start with, but it will create treasures when goaded creatures die. Then the enchantment can sacrifice artifacts like those treasures to add counters to Baloth. So these work well together. But of course the idea here is we're goading stuff. So we have things like Agitator Ant, Geode Rager, Vengeful Ancestor to help goad creatures. The first rewards players for goading their own creatures. The Rager goads every creature a player controls when you trigger landfall, and the Ancestor goads something every time it attacks, and it's a dragon so it will trigger your commander as well, and also the Ancestor will start dealing damage when goaded creatures attack. But remember that your commander triggers just if a creature had to attack. It doesn't necessarily say goaded, even though we are a very goad focused deck. The commander just cares if something is forced to attack. So we have things like Avatar of Slaughter, Warmonger Hellkite, and Angler Turtle to just force everyone to attack with every creature they control every single turn, which is good enough for us. It's going to make our commander huge, it's going to draw us extra cards. Then we discourage people from attacking us specifically with things like Stuffy Doll, Brash Taunter, and Kazul. The first 2 are indestructible blockers that will damage players when they block, which, people don't want to attack into those, and Kazul will give us tokens when we are attacked. We also have things like the curses to encourage people to attack others for sweet rewards. So you're really just creating chaos. You're just forcing everyone to attack and you're benefiting from it basically. And to ratchet up that chaos even further, we get things like Death Kiss and Spectacular Showdown. Death Kiss will double the power of any creature that attacks one of your opponents. So once again, you want to attack someone else, not us, because you get double power, and that's cool, right? And then Spectacular Showdown will put a double strike counter on a creature and then goad it, which sounds cool, but it also has Overload. Overload, of course, meaning instead of targeting, you put them on every creature. So an overloaded Spectacular Showdown puts a double strike counter on every single creature and then goads the entire table. So every single player is forced to attack someone who isn't you with double strike. So it's accurate to its name. It is definitely a Spectacular Showdown. That's going to be pretty explosive. But don't forget that this is still a dragon deck, so we get a lot of sweet dragons like Territorial Hellkite, Niv Mizzet, Drakuseth, dragons. Your commander will goad things when you attack with him, so we have dragons. We have lots of dragons that are forced to attack. You can't help it. They're forced to attack. It's not your fault, right? Just basically, guys, the idea here is we are an Izzet dragon deck that goads the entire table into just attacking constantly, and we're kind of sowing chaos. We're the chaos deck. Force everyone to attack, get a big commander, draw a bunch of cards, play a bunch of dragons. That's the idea. That is Draconic Dissent. If that sounds fun, definitely check it out. Next on our list is Exit from Exile with Baldur Dreadwolf Herald as the commander. It's a 3-mana 3/3 that says whenever you cast a spell or play a land from exile, make a 2/2 wolf. Then it gives us a way to trigger that by allowing us to discard unneeded cards to exile the top card of our library and play it this turn. So that's going to count as casting from exile. So we're trying to exile stuff and cast it. The bonus commander is Durnan and Passionate Archaeologist. When Durnan attacks, you look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can choose a creature and then cast it from exile for the rest of the game. So more casting from exile, and the enchantment will deal damage equal to the mana value of creatures we cast when we cast them from exile, so long as we control our commander. And remember, while you can play this as your commander instead of Baldur, I mean, it's still a pretty sweet draw to find, a Passionate Archaeologist. It just, works really well with what the deck is doing naturally anyway. So basically, we're casting stuff from exile and we're flooding the board with 2/2 wolves. So how do we cast stuff from exile? Well, there are a ton of ways to do that. Like, first off, there's foretell cards, Green Slime, Battle Mammoth, Demon Bolt. Since we cast these from exile, our commander will see them and give us extra wolves in addition to the effects of these cards, right? We play a Battle Mammoth, that's already a pretty sweet creature, also get a 2/2 wolf. We play a Demon Bolt, a perfectly okay removal spell, we also get a 2/2 wolf. Then we have Cascade, like Bloodbraid Elf, Aurora Phoenix, Sweet Gum Recluse. So Cascade means when we play a card with Cascade, we reveal cards off the top of our library until we hit a non-land card that costs less, then we cast it for free. So you'll be casting from exile. And the Phoenix will see Cascade happening from the graveyard and return to your hand, so you can recast it and recascade again for more wolves. And then there's also Wild Mage Sorcerer. This gives all cards you cast from exile Cascade. So basically the base idea here is like you play a Cascade spell, and when you cast the second spell, the Sorcerer is going to give that second spell Cascade. That's the intention, but the Wild Mage Sorcerer, the wording says anything you cast from exile. So if you foretell something, when you cast it, the Wild Mage Sorcerer is going to give it Cascade. So like Battle Mammoth, for example, if you foretell it, then cast it, the Sorcerer will give it Cascade when you cast it. So that's just more 2/2 wolves, not to mention just great value. Then we have creatures with adventures like Bone Crusher Giant, Lovestruck Beast, Beanstalk Giant. These all have spells that we cast first, and then the creature goes into exile. We can cast the creature, commander sees that, makes more 2/2 wolves. Pretty simple, right? Like Bone Crusher Giant, you deal 2 damage to something, then you cast the giant, get a wolf. But we get a new card called Linkali Hunter, which is particularly insane. So first, the adventure will exile a creature card from our graveyard and let us cast it this turn. So that's another way to cast from exile, but then once we play the hunter, we can cast 1 creature per turn from exile for 0 mana. So the simple thing here is you can play the adventure, exile something, then play the creature. Your commander sees that, makes a 2/2 wolf, and then the thing you exiled can be cast as well for 0 mana because it costs 0 now. And not only do you get that for free, but you also get another wolf. That of course takes a lot of mana. You don't have to do that, but that's an option. But it also synergizes well with some of the aforementioned creatures. Like if you have the hunter in play, you can play the adventure portion of Beanstalk Giant, for example, get a land, then cast the creature for 0, not only get a big giant, but also get that extra 2/2 wolf. And we also have a lot of ways to cast stuff from exile that we get off the top of libraries, like Etali, Dream Pillager, Laelia. The first will exile stuff off our opponent's libraries, let us cast them for free to make more 2/2 wolves. The other 2 exile stuff off of our library lets us cast them, once again, more wolves. Similarly, there are things like Ignite the Future, Escape to the Wild, Stolen Strategies. all the same concept here, just not creatures. They just let us exile stuff off the top of our library or our opponent's library, lets us cast them, and all this casting makes more wolves. Not to mention all the card advantage from getting to cast so much extra stuff, right? So that's the general idea here. There's plenty more we don't have time to talk about, like rebounding spells and spells that like to recast themselves. That's kind of fun. There's some other cool creatures. Oh, there's actually a demon that literally copies everything you cast from Exile, which is kind of crazy, by the way. You should definitely pause and read this. It's a crazy card. But the general idea here is just you get tons of value from being able to cast just extra stuff, but you also get an army of wolves as well. So if that sounds fun to you, Exit from Exile might be your deck. Next on our list is Mind Flayarrrs. Oh wait, no, hang on. Mind Flayarrrs. Get it? Because Mind Flayarrrs, but it's a pirate. Anyway, this is a tribal horror deck with Captain What's-His-Face at the helm. Get it? At the helm, because it's a pirate ship. Anyway, it's a 3/6 that gives your horrors menace, so they're hard to block. Then, when they deal damage to an opponent, that player will mill cards equal to how much damage they take from horrors. Then, at the end of your turn, you get to choose an artifact or creature from any graveyard that was milled this turn and return it to the battlefield under your control. So, we're an aggressive, evasive tribal horror deck that's milling people's libraries and pillaging their graveyards for free stuff. The alternate commander is Zilix and Haunted One. Zilix will make 1/1 tokens whenever someone mills one or more creatures, so that's pretty great, and it can force people to mill. The enchantment will see our commander tapping and give all creatures that share a type with it, that being horror, +2/+0, and undying, which helps us, be more aggressive and attacking because we want to hit our opponents so we can get their stuff out of their graveyards. So, horrors. First off, I'm going to be stressing the second syllable in horrors as strongly as I can. That way the YouTube family-friendly filters don't think I'm saying something, potentially inappropriate, like, horse. We don't want that. So anyway, we have horses that help us mill or care about milling. We have Nemesis of Reason, Consuming Aberration. The first mills 10 when it attacks, which is pretty crazy. And the second will mill all players at the table every time we cast a spell. And then it has power and toughness equal to the number of cards in all graveyards. So lots of milling, big giant creature. Remember, not only is this thing going to be huge, but if we have our commander, when it hits someone, they're going to mill even more cards and make it even bigger, right? So yeah, pretty crazy. And this is a common theme with horrors. We have Night Howler, Sewer Nemesis, Uchulon. The first has power toughness equal to the number of creatures in all graveyards. The second chooses a player, then has power and toughness equal to the number of cards in the chosen player's graveyard. And it also makes them mill when they cast things, so they feed the Sewer Nemesis. And the Uchima thingy, it has power equal to the number of horrors you control, technically crabs and whatnot as well, but we're a horror deck. But then at the end of your turn, you can exile a creature from a graveyard to duplicate it. And remember, each copy will be able to copy itself the following turn. So it might sound like, oh, you get 1 copy per turn. No, you get 1 copy, then you get 2 copies, then you get 4 copies, then you get 8 copies, right? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And these will power each other up too, right? Because the more you have, the more power they'll have because they'll see each other as horrors, right? If you have 10 of them, then they're all going to have 10 power. If you have 30 of them, they're going to have 30 power. And then when they hit people, if you have your commander, they're just going to mill a ton of cards, right? So that's pretty cool. And then there's Guilt Feeder, which has fear, and if we have our commander, also menace, so pretty hard to block. And when it goes unblocked, it will make the opponent lose life equal to the number of cards in their graveyard, which is very easily a whole lot of cards in this deck. I mean, remember Consuming Aberration and Sewer Menace, and I haven't even mentioned Mind Crank as well, which makes people mill every time they take damage. And don't forget our commander also mills with every bit of damage we do with horrors. So Guilt Feeder, making people lose life equal to their graveyard count, can just straight up one-shot people. Pretty crazy. And let's not forget that our commander loves to reanimate our opponent's stuff. And this theme of stealing our opponent's stuff continues with things like Mind Flayarrrs, which, is appropriate for the deck, Brain Stealer Dragon, Psionic Ritual. The first just yoinks one of your opponent's creatures, because why not? The dragon will exile the top card of all opponents' libraries every turn, and then you can cast them for the rest of the game. And if it's still in play when we cast them, they'll lose a life. So not only do we get to cast their stuff, but we make them lose life as well. And the last will let us cast instants and sorceries from our opponent's graveyard for free. Well, we have to cast the spell, but we don't have to pay the mana cost. And it has Replicate, and the Replicate cost is just tapping a horror. So if we have 5 or 6 horrors, we can tap them and make, 5 or 6 copies of this, which could be pretty crazy if it's in the late game, or it doesn't even have to be in the late game, because we're milling our opponent's libraries, right? We're milling so much that we just get to look at all their stuff and say, what's the biggest crap that I can cast right now, and just cast all kinds of stuff from everyone's graveyard. So that's fun. And I also have to mention Endless Evil. It makes a copy of something every turn, right? You enchant it onto a creature every turn. It makes a copy, but it's a 1/1. But that's not really a big deal in this deck, because there's tons of horrors that are perfectly happy with being 1/1s. All of our creatures that get +1/+1 based on, graveyard counts and stuff. Who cares, right? Plus, there's tons of creatures with really cool enter the battlefield effects. Making a copy of Ravenous Chupacabra every turn and just blowing something up every turn. Who cares if it's a 1/1? We just get to blow something up every turn. That's pretty cool. But then, if someone kills the creature that it's enchanting, because we're a horror deck, it goes right back to our hand. And then we can just recast it on another creature and start generating more replicas of something. So that's pretty cool. And anyway, yeah, there's plenty more gross, disgusting horrors that we don't have time to talk about. Plenty of other cool things in this deck. But basically, it's a Dimir tribal horror deck where you mill your opponents and steal stuff from their graveyards. If that sounds fun, definitely look into Mind Flayarrrs. Cool. And finally, we have Party Time. This is an Orzhov deck with Nalia Diarnis at the helm. It doesn't work with this deck. Anyway, this is a party deck, as in the Zendikar Rising mechanic. The commander lets you look at the top card of your library, and you can cast clerics, rogues, warriors, and wizards, which is actually some pretty good card advantage. Anytime you have one of those on top, it's just free cards. Constantly free cards. Then at the beginning of combat, if you have a full party, all of your creatures get a +1/+1 counter and gain death touch until end of turn. So we build a party and they get big. Pretty simple, right? The bonus commander is Barakos and Folk Hero. The creature is every party type to begin with, so that helps with filling out your party. Then when it attacks, defending player loses X life and you make X treasures, where X is your party count. And then the enchantment once per turn allows you to draw when you basically cast a party member. It has to share a type with Barakos, but Barakos is all the party types, so basically you always draw something once per turn for the most part. Since only one set of Magic has had party as a mechanic, we get a lot of new support cards for the archetype, like Harper Recruiter, Seasoned Dungeoneer, Solemn Doom Guide. The first will let you reveal the top 4 cards when you attack. Then you can reveal a creature of each party type and put it into your hand. So the best case scenario, of course, is that you have all 4 party types on top and you basically draw 4. Very unlikely, but you're probably going to get at least 1 or 2 cards from it. You see a wizard and a warrior, great, you get both of those, right? Stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. The second will give a party member protection from creatures on attacking, so that's very useful because we are kind of an aggro deck, and that helps get through defenses. And it also explores, so that's more card advantage. That's right, card advantage in white, you heard it. And the last gives our fallen party members Unearth, which means we can pay to bring them back into play for a turn. When you think of the party mechanic, it's very kind of upbeat, right? You are assembling a team of happy-go-lucky adventurers. You got camaraderie and friendship, but this is still an Orzhov deck, and just because someone dies doesn't mean they should stop being useful, right? Right. There are also a lot of cards from Zendikar Rising you might remember, like Archpriest of Iona, Squad Commander, Thwart the Grave. The first pumps if we have party, squad member puts out tokens. Thwart the Grave is another way to get those dead party members back. All in standard right now. You might be familiar with those. We also get Stick Together, which is a cool new party payoff. Board Sweeper. It says each player chooses a party, kind of, which is to say, a creature of each party type. Then you blow everything else up. So some people at the table might not have any, because if you're playing like a dragon deck, you're not going to have many, rogues and wizards and warriors and clerics. But basically, you're guaranteed to keep, 4 creatures. Might be your entire board, and everyone else gets wiped out. So a cool sort of one-sided board sweeper in a party deck. But remember, just because we're a party deck doesn't mean that every card has to care about the party mechanic. We just want all of our creatures to be those types, right? We want clerics, we want rogues, we want warriors, we want wizards, and that's all that matters. So we get a lot of classic commander staples that just so happen to be those creature types, like Mikaeus and High Priest of Penance. Great commander cards that also happen to be clerics, right? We get Zulaport, Cutthroat, and Gonti. Once again, commonly played in commander, also both rogues. You get Jazal Goldmane, you get Butcher of Malakir. You've probably seen these before, and they're both warriors, so that's more party. And there are some classic wizards like Grim, Haruspex, and Puppeteer Click. So we get some very powerful classic commander cards that are kind of like auto includes in a lot of decks, and also they're party creature types. And we can also fill out our party with things like Mirror Entity, Irregular Cohort, and Valiant Changeling. These have Changeling, so they are every creature type, making it much easier to keep a party together so your commander can keep dishing out those +1/+1 counters. And if that isn't easy enough, you also get Maskwood Nexus. All of your creatures are all creature types, so you have 4 creatures, you have party online, you don't even have to think about it. And as you might have guessed by now, there's plenty more we don't have time to talk about. Lots of powerful removal because we're in Orzhov, lots of ways to generate card advantage. We have some pretty cool party creatures, but the plan is to assemble a party and then make them huge by adding a ton of counters on them with your commander. That sounds fun? Check out Party Time. And that's it. Those are the 4 commander decks in Commander Legends Baldur's Gate. Be sure to let me know which deck you're most interested in, and again, full deck lists in the description. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.